What is Blue Courage, and what are you trying to accomplish with it?
Well, Blue Courage is an incredible program that we came across. Captain Conway and I went to Arizona to attend an instructor course, and it's a very powerful program that we're bringing to the employees of the Sheriff's Office. I'll say real quick that I'm very excited that Blue Courage has a module for correctional officers that is coming out in the next 3 or 4 months that will be then provided to our employees at the detention center. But it's difficult to describe Blue Courage in one statement because it's a 2-day training program. But in essence, Peter, it is all about having a very healthy life in the law enforcement career. We dive into post-traumatic stress that officers deal with, and the fact that it may not just be one event that triggers it, but years of events that build up. We talk about resilience in the job that is required of people that are exposed to just sort of the darkest corners of our society every day. It has everything to do with positive psychology and how to have a high performance, and essentially a lot of cops are focused on high performance and doing the very best job they can in intense situations. So what Blue Courage does is gets our employees to a place where they're very healthy, so that when they are in a critical incident situation, they're making decisions from a very healthy platform, if that makes sense. If you're in a tough part in your career and you're not doing well, you may not make good decisions in those critical incident moments. But so it's all about being healthy. And the other thing it deals with is police culture. Police culture has been around since the beginning of time, but there are some negative things about that police culture that we're going to address. One of them is cynicism. One of the quotes in this training is that cynicism is the new corruption in policing. And what that means is that we have to... cynicism is sort of this, in some weird way, sort of a badge of honor and part of the career because of the stuff we deal with. But we're teaching that it doesn't have to be that you can deal with the things that we see and deal with and the people that we have to work with in crisis and not be cynical about that, but just look at it in a much more healthy way. So again, it's tough to describe Blue Courage in one statement, but that's sort of an overall view of what it is. It's all about being healthy in this career that can, frankly, really tax people and take a toll.
Now, what about the mindset that seems to have settled over the nation, if you will, like blanketed the country from one end to the other, that all of a sudden police are no longer looked at as the friend of the citizen, but rather somehow as the enemy, and there have been so many shootings and police have been shot and that sort of thing for sometimes no reason at all. Does Blue Courage help to address that?
It does. It gets into the police culture thing, but we talk about practical wisdom and the power of influence. We spend quite a bit of time on that. What I mean by that is that every call go to, they have an opportunity to leave an impact on somebody's life and to influence them in a very positive way. So we share examples of we use some TED Talks, and one of them is a sergeant of a SWAT team in Kansas City who talks about embracing this practical wisdom and the power of influence. And I won't try not to be too long-winded here, but they talk about going on a SWAT call. I mean, these guys are full-time SWAT members, and they did a raid on a drug house, and in the house were several babies who were crying, and this commander talks about going into the kitchen and finding one of the SWAT officers making baby bottles for these kids to help calm them down. And so it's sort of this switch in mindset of doing your job and doing it safely, but also having a heart for people in those situations. And you talk about a SWAT officer in full tactical gear making baby bottles to address the situation of crying babies, which makes it a chaotic environment. What a great way to leave a legacy, to have influence on people while you're doing your job in a very positive way. And so there's just millions of examples of things that we can do. And A lot of our deputies already do that. I know of many stories where deputies come across people who are in crisis. I know deputies have paid for bus tickets for people that needed it, provided meals for people who didn't have food to eat. And so there's a lot of those things already happening. We just want to encourage that because we're really good at sitting around the break table and talking about a case we were in, the action stuff. But we need to be better about talking about the really good-hearted things that our officers do, frankly, all the time. But we just don't kind of talk about it because it's not really part of that culture that we've been talking about.
I think what I hear,
it's encouraging that stuff.
I think what I hear you saying is it takes a great deal of courage to be vulnerable, and because vulnerability, sometimes I think you guys must think it must be the enemy, because when you're vulnerable, that means that someone can hurt you, and one of the things that you are concerned with is not just protecting others, but protecting yourself.
That's exactly right, Peter. We talk about courage and bravery and the difference in those things. It takes bravery to kick in the door and go into an unknown situation and apprehend a drug dealer or whatever the situation might be. But it also takes courage to identify when a coworker is struggling and to step into that and offer help and to be vulnerable, just as you had mentioned. And, the other thing I say about when people ask me about the state of the nation in law enforcement, I always like to point out that we are very fortunate to be in law enforcement in the community that we serve because it's very different than what happens, and I don't want to speak poorly of Chicago, but we're just not that. I'm very lucky to work in law enforcement in a community that frankly, by and large, supports us in what we do.